Welcome to Kitchen Table Life with Nancy and Charity, a podcast where friends gather to spill the coffee. We talk practical truth about life's challenges, loving well, and leading strong.
Come on, friends, and gather round.
Have you ever said the wrong thing? Maybe even something you regret, but didn't mean it? Warring with words is tough. Today, we're going to talk about winning that war.
Fight, fight, fight. That's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Yeah, I feel like I fight with my words a lot too. I just think raising kids, being married, working with others, if you have to contend with people at all, your words can sometimes get in your way. And I don't know, starting with fight, 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 really, it's kind of how I feel sometimes when we're talking about words.
I feel sometimes it's life. Like we're like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to fight my way through it. I'm going to fight my way through the grocery store. I'm going to fight. I'm going to do it. I can fight. So, but yeah, a lot of it is words.
I've said more than a few words that I wish that I could take back.
Oh, I think we all have.
Oh, yeah. Well, and sometimes it's like the tired mom and the flippant word, your kid comes and asks just one more question. And it's, Mom, why do we clip our toenails? Something that it's because we do. Because we do. Okay. Just go to bed. Like we've all had those moments. And really, it could have been a teachable hygiene moment, but you were at the end of the day and you were just over it.
Right.
But sometimes I'm going to tell you, I think we've talked about the fact that I didn't grow up in church. For me, sometimes those words, well, who are we kidding? Church people do the same thing. Sometimes the words are calculated and ugly. I mean, that's just, they intentionally were thoughtful to do the most damage possible. And I don't do that so much anymore, but there was a day, boy, when I was highly skilled at that particular endeavor.
You could do that.
I could. And it's not something I'm proud of, but it was, if I'm being completely honest, Charity, it was God had given me a very prophetic personality, that black and white kind of personality. But he also had given me the ability to see things in people. You know what I mean? Just by the way they talked, I could hear their giftings, but I could also hear their doubts and their fears and their whatever. And I hadn't learned how to use that gift for the good of the kingdom yet.
Aw.
And so I used it the other way. And so if somebody was unkind to me, well, they got the sharp end of that particular stick. So
Aw. Well, Nancy, I am reminded, of what Thumper's mother said. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all.
I agree. And my mother actually quoted that very same statement from Bambi. But you know what else she said? She said, "You don't start it, but if somebody else does, boy, you better finish."
Your
I
mom.
told you I didn't grow up in a Jesus-filled house, right? This is the kitchen table. We're just spilling the coffee, which is the truth with some Jesus. That's just, that's who we are. Sometimes I've said things too that I wasn't trying, but somehow I was offensive.
Mhm.
And so there are days, I don't know about you, but I just feel like, and depending on what's going on, I feel like I'm in a little bit of a war with my words.
Sometimes I'm in a war with my face
Yes.
because my face says a lot of things that my mouth doesn't. I actually scared a guy at a restaurant a couple weeks ago. Yeah, just because they didn't have any ketchup. And he must have saw a look on my face, and I was like, mm-hmm. And he was like, ooh, she's scary.
Well, I saw a t-shirt not too long ago that it says, I, la- I laugh and I feel like it might be a banner I should wear on certain days. It says, "I'm sorry what my face said when you were talking."
That's great.
But, I think there has to be intentionality around our words, and we have to remember that it's not always necessary to talk. And I'll give you a for instance, and this is one of those times I aimed to say the right words, and boy, I just stepped in it. There was an event that I went to, and this gentleman who I do business with, his wife was pregnant, and I I knew because he had mentioned it, but I had not seen her.
Okay.
And she's shorter than me, and for those of you who've never seen me, I'm like 5'1", so shorter than me is saying something. And this poor woman looked like she could fall over at any moment, she was so pregnant.
Aw.
And it was so obvious, it wasn't like the bump was developing, she was very pregnant. I was like, "Oh my goodness, when are you due?" Just, like, having the regular conversation, and I thought the answer was gonna be any minute. 4 months. She was due in 4 months, and, like, these words begin to come out, "Oh my gosh, that's such a long time." And,
Oh.
like, I didn't say you're already so big, right? But I clearly stopped short of that, and then I inserted something else. It just kept getting worse, and it was like I couldn't even stop myself.
Oh, no.
Every time I tried to say the next thing, I was like, "Let me just help you find your seat." It was so, and I've been that woman. Do you know what I mean? My last pregnancy, I was humongous. I've been in that place, and everything on her, she needed the t-shirt that day because everything on her face was, "Lady, find me my seat and get away from me and stop talking." And that's fun and lighthearted, right? That's not some of the other things that we've talked about, but sometimes it's very unintentional that we walk into that stuff. Sometimes, like I said, it's very calculated. And whether that's for the good or for the bad, I just think we don't spend enough time recognizing the value and the importance of the word we speak and
Right.
trying to kind of hone in that skill or that craft as it comes to relating to God's people in his kingdom.
There's something that I've done for a really long time. And I've done it so long that I can't actually remember when I started doing it. And it could be something that my parents instilled in me when I was young.
Sure.
But I call it bringing the positive because I hate negative stuff. Oh, just, like even bad news. Like, can we just spin it so it doesn't feel like bad news? We'll just have good news, but it can be sad. Even with myself, bringing the positive. So if something's bad, I'm like, okay, how can I bring the positive into this?
Mhm.
And I remember there was a time, or I was just going through a really trying time. And it wasn't like a few days, it was months and months and months. Actually, longer than a year. It was just really, really trying for me. And I picked a word, and I feel like God gave me this word, but the word was courage. And every day I would leave my house or my apartment, wherever I was living at the time, and I would like raise my hands in the air, like, like you're like a football game, kind of like, oh, I'm going to
Mhm.
cheer. And I would say, courage. And I was like, to myself, I said it out loud. I didn't just think it, but I'm like, I'm declaring courage to myself and the entire world. The whole universe knows it right now. I'm claiming courage to face my day. And it's because I didn't want to face my day starting with fear, disappointment. Like I wanted to find that word, and like that's what I was bringing to the situation. Courage. And for me, I don't know, helped me get through a lot.
But I think what you're saying is very powerful, right? Because two situations, we're both talking about different interactions. When I was at my event, I didn't go into the event going, "Okay, Nancy, try to be intentional." It was more about like, "Let's get it done." My head was not actually on the focus of communicating well, even
Mm,
though that was part of my role at the time. My brain shifted to event management and not people interaction where it should have been. And in your case, you knew that you were in the middle of a mess and
yeah.
you chose to be intentional about your words or word as it were. But
Word.
what happened in the atmosphere of that car for you when you got in and maybe there was fear or anxiety and then you took your little stance with your arms and was like courage? You were speaking that into the atmosphere, you were speaking that into the situation, and it changes your presence and how you carry yourself, how you
Mhm.
talk to people, what it feels like in that space. It's powerful.
I always think of it, it changes my perspective.
Mhm.
How I see everything. Because we're going to react to how we see things. Doesn't mean that we don't see bad things or negative things, but it changes our perspective on how to deal with stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. When you get into group settings, sometimes I find, especially today, people get nervous when nobody's talking. And
Mhm.
it's like we don't want to, because we live in such a chaotic world now, like we don't want to leave an opportunity for silence. And so people will just talk. And that's when I watch people really step in it or
Mm.
sound like self-important or even arrogant. And I don't think they actually are because, I've watched some people that I know do this, but because they had to talk to fill the space, it really cost them how other people viewed them. And so I love the quote by Abraham Lincoln. He says, "Better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt."
That is so true.
And I'll tell you, I have been at more than one meeting or table where I have nodded and smiled, and they have thought I've known more than I do.
Nod and smile. Nod and smile. We've all done
Nod
that
and smile.
anyway. Yeah, nod.
Right? But the truth is, often we're intentional about practicing to get better at many things. You and I were talking about this earlier. Sometimes, if I want to get better at cooking, I may call and say, "Hey, Charity, I want to start cooking better food for my husband. What would you recommend? What did you learn?"
Right.
Or I might be like, "Charity, I want to be a better mom, and I want to, what would you suggest? What would you suggest for timeouts? What would you suggest for screen time limits? Like what do you think?" And but for both of those topics, I might listen to podcasts. I might go watch YouTube videos. I might go read some books about it. But I would be very intentional about trying to get better. And those are all situational. But everything that we've talked about, no pun intended here, but everything we've talked about still is surrounded by words. And we don't make a habit of practicing getting better at our words.
And we want to change that habit, right?
Yes.
Right,
It's a
everyone listening that's going to join us. We're going to bring positive. We're going to change that habit together. We're going to have courage.
That's right. We're gonna be more intentional about our words. When I first started changing the way that I speak, I read this book by Joyce Meyer, and I gotta be honest, it was the title that grabbed me.
Yeah.
It was called Me and My Big Mouth. And I thought, I feel like that could be a book for me.
Oh,
And I expected it to be full of correction and all the things. And there is some of that in there. But really, Joyce talks about the power of your words
hmm,
and the impact about what you speak and even what you write about your life. She spent a lot of time complaining about not speaking enough or when she lost her job. Like this is early on in her career. It was just negative. I'm never going to do this. And eventually went, wait a minute. I need to change my confession. I need to change my words. And what often happens, and we talked about this a little bit when we talked about vision, I think in our December podcast, was that I say that I want to dream this way.
right.
I want to have a great career. I want to do these things, but then we speak, well, I'm not really good enough. Well, I don't have the time. I don't have the money. I don't have. And so we start speaking what we can see instead of speaking what we're praying into, instead of
Right.
speaking God's word over the situation.
I love how you're always about what does God have to say about that? Or
Right.
let's pray about that one. Or, I love the example you've used in the past where if I'm going to build a house, how am I how am I building this house? Let's build this
Right.
house the right way, and it's so very important, Nancy.
I agree. The Bible has a lot to say about words too. In fact, if you read through the book of Proverbs alone, I had a friend who did this one year. She's like, so what I did is I got a brand new Bible, I got a brand new highlighter, and I started
Uh,
reading through the Bible. And I started in Proverbs and I highlighted everything that God said about the words we speak. She goes, and I highlighted a lot. She goes, and I finally thought, maybe God's trying to tell me something about my words.
Proverbs is good. I love Proverbs.
I do too. But it's elsewhere as well. Ephesians 4:29 says, "Don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen."
Well, Nancy, Matthew 15:11 says, it's not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but what comes out of the mouth that defiles a person.
First Peter 3:10 actually says, "If you want to enjoy life and see many happy days, keep your tongue from speaking evil and your lips from telling lies." And I think that's easier when we're intentional. Like you said, how is the house built?
Right.
So if I'm intentional about how I want to speak, and it might even be we start with the prayer in the morning. God, help me with my words today. Bring to my remembrance the words that you've given me for these situations. And when in doubt, shh.
Be quiet. I don't know the verse. I'm pretty sure it's in the Bible. It says something about we are accountable for every word that comes out of our mouth.
Yes.
Yeah, like that's. I've actually looked at someone one time and I said, "How many words are you going to speak?"
Oh my goodness.
I probably shouldn't have said that, but I did. Yeah.
So that verse is actually out of Matthew 12:36. It says, I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give an account for every careless word they speak. And I've actually preached this before. And this one is, I mean, I know that I have said plenty of bad, so I've got a lot to account for. But I truly believe, and it's not that I have a scripture that ties to this, it just logically makes sense to me. But not only do I believe we're going to have to give an account for every careless word we speak, I think we're going to have to give an account for those words that we were told to speak that we did not.
Ooh. Yeah. It's
Because there are times that God has said, call Charity and tell her this. Now, I will tell you, if the Lord tells me now, boy, I am on that phone so fast or shooting a text. But there was a season when I didn't quite understand how that worked. And I believe God's grace is sufficient there, right? I don't think we're going to be up there and he's going to be like, well, but now that I know better, now that I have learned how to hear the voice of God,
right.
and when I feel like God says, call Charity and just encourage her, that I don't hesitate to pick up the phone to give a word of encouragement. And every time I've been obedient, by the way, I've watched how God's faithfulness, I didn't know. I'm
Right.
like, I don't know why you're a very happy person, Charity, that you might need encouragement today, but I just wanted to tell you that you're awesome and I love you, or whatever, whatever I call for. And I think that sometimes we overlook that. And that's why I really believe that we have to be intentional about what we're doing with our words, because we were meant to be together with one another in community. And undoubtedly, that's where conversations take place. I
Right.
am better because of you. There's actually uh, Desmond Tutu shared in one of his books the word Ubuntu. And I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right, but he's from South Africa. And it means, basically a paraphrase, I can't be all of me if you're not all of you. And the value in that is you have unique gifts and anointings and callings on you. And your words are a reflection of some of that, right?
Right.
And so if you hold back on that, there may be pieces of you I need to be able to execute fully being me, because we were designed to be community together.
We're designed to work together. It's all of us bringing our gifts, the fruits of the Spirit in our lives to accomplish God's will.
Absolutely. And our words are foundational to that. So jumping back into Proverbs, because we mentioned the power of words and Proverbs, so I want to make sure we get a couple of these in here. Proverbs 13:3 says, whoever guards his mouth preserves his life. We kind of just talked about that a minute ago. He who opens wide his lips comes to ruin.
Mm. Proverbs 17:28. Well, maybe this is where Abraham Lincoln got his quote, but
That's what I'm thinking.
yeah, even a fool wasn't he smart though? I'm just saying. Even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise. When he closes his lips, he is deemed intelligent.
Yeah.
Good job, Abe.
But his sass was better than to open your mouth and remove all
Right.
doubt. All right. So Proverbs 18:21 says, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits. And that, I think, is critical. And if you actually go back to the Old Testament, it tells you that you have the choice between life and death. And
Hmm.
then God, I always joke because I'm like, and then God gives you the answer. He says, choose life.
Right. It takes all the questioning out, really. Like, these are your
Hmm.
options, but this is what you should do if you want to. I'm giving you this opportunity to make that choice for yourself, but I'm just letting you know which one's the better one.
Right. Exactly.
Proverbs 10:31 says, "The mouth of a godly person gives wise advice, but the tongue that deceives will be cut off."
Uh-huh. And am I glad that my ugly days are behind me and under the blood of Jesus?
Aren't we all?
Some of these are kind of brutal when you think about it. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. And then what you just talked about, but the tongue that deceives will be cut off.
Mm,
Those are very vivid,
yes.
in the pictorial view of,
Right.
of what those words are. And so does that not speak to the importance of our words? And the Bible talks about the fact that we're created in God's image. God spoke the world into being by his power, the power of his words. That's from Hebrews 11:3. If you go back to Genesis, everything he spoke came to be.
Right.
We're made in his image and we were made to have dominion. Our power comes not only because we have the spirit living within us, but exercising that authority comes from our mouth. We have got to stop, even though we sometimes feel like we're warring with our words. We have to really move ourselves into the driver's seat.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we submit to our words. You know what I
Mm,
mean? We surrender to them like they're going to lead us, much like our thoughts, right?
right.
But just because you think it, even though it might come to the tip of your tongue, doesn't mean you've got to say
We have to use that wonderful 4-letter word, Nancy. Nope.
it. Nope.
Nope. When something comes to your mind and it's not supposed to, that you're not supposed to act on it or say it or whatever, you need to tell yourself, nope, and
I
then
love
move
it.
forward. Nope.
Well, what I find so interesting, Charity, is that as foundational as words are in our lives, we don't put more intentionality on what we say and how we say it. And what we say is not necessarily a result of who we are. Sometimes you might say an ugly word, you might yell at your spouse, twice in one day, 10
Yeah.
times or whatever.
I've told my husband sometimes in advance, I when we were dating, I told him, I said, just so you know, you'll never have to wonder what I'm thinking about because I will tell you everything I'm thinking, just
He
so
thought
you
it was a
know.
gift. Little did he know.
Little did he know. But I will tell him, I'll come up to him and I'll be like, honey, I am having a bad day. This is how I feel. This is how I feel about things. This is how I feel about life. This is how I feel about my broken dishwasher, whatever it is. It's a different way I'm trying to bring the positive. It's a way to approach something.
Well, what you're saying
Yeah.
gently is, honey, you're currently surrounded by a minefield. Good luck.
Good luck. Just so you're aware, this is what's going on. But I think that helps me because even I'm trying to be intentional about
Right.
I have these feelings and I want to express them, but I want to express them in a healthy way that helps
Absolutely.
my spouse know what's going on.
Right. Today is not the day to have the long, brainy conversation about the amazing book you just read.
No,
Today is the day to return with pizza and cookies.
exactly.
But I think that intentionality is, are we controlling our tongue using the spirit to guide us? Or are we really letting the enemy use our speech to run roughshod over our lives and the lives of those we encounter? God has given us power and authority over our words through his word. Words are your greatest weapon, and the greatest tool you have is just below your nose. That's our mouth, right? So, the question we're leaving you with this week is, how are you going to use what God has given you? As you continue into 2025, will you speak life and power into your dreams and into others? Or will you speak something else? Your words fuel your presence, and together they have the power to change atmospheres and to change the world. So stop warring with your words, be intentional, and start winning with them instead.
Until next time, be sure to like, share, and follow us on social media.
And keep it real at the kitchen table.